All righty, he's been here all season long. He's our money man. 95.7 The Game. Reporter John Dickinson in the house. He saw all the playoff games. He saw all the home regular season games, a ton of away games. He knows what he's talking about, ladies and gentlemen. What's up, JD?
What's up, fellas? Yeah, how you doing? Good to be with you. 13 in the playoffs, and I think it wound up being, 45 or 46 in the regular season, something like that.
All right, here's where I want to start. I want to obviously start with kind of what happens next, and here's where I'm at. Because you've had a dynasty, it's put you into a really tricky position, which is fine. But I think at this point, like, all options are probably on the table, and it's going to start with what Draymond's going to do, what Bob Myers going to do. But I guess what I'm saying is, for the first time in a while, it doesn't feel like there's just an automatic avenue to go down, which will ensure success.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the other part of it, though, is just coming off of Friday night. I mean, it seems like everybody within the organization, at least for right now, is on the same page of wanting it to be Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green coming back, along with Steve Kerr, and if Bob Myers wants to, Bob Myers as well. So I do think there's a preferred initial choice. And look, I shared this yesterday on social media. I think Bob Myers is a really thoughtful individual. But let's be honest, when you look at the Woj report from yesterday on the pregame before the Sixers-Celtics game, I mean, to me, Bob Myers, I think, is caught between wanting to leave, feels like he wants to leave, and maybe take a break, which I've said to you guys for a while. I don't think this was about money, and I don't really think it was necessarily about Joe Lacob either, even though I think so many have been hell-bent to, well, it has to be about that. Why would he not want to stay? I think it's bigger things, more personal things for him as the type of thoughtful individual that he is. But I also think he wants to be ride or die with Steph, Klay, and Draymond and Steve Kerr until the end. But so he's, I think, caught. Like, I kind of, and again, I don't know this. It's just my opinion. But as far as that goes with Bob, I just kind of feel like that's where he's at. But as far as it gets back to the big three, they seem committed to figuring out a way to have Draymond come back and maybe Klay, if he's willing to have his salary after this next year start to go down coming back even beyond next year. But let's just focus on next year. Well, the question is, if you're committed to the big three and Steve Kerr for next year, which it sounds like it is, well, then how do you get better when you also say, and you guys have been talking about this for 3 hours, you also say that this team wasn't good enough. So on the one hand, you're all in on those three, but the rest of it wasn't good enough. So how do you get better? Well, then the only answer to how you get better is you have to look to trade Jordan Poole if you can, Jonathan Kuminga if you can, maybe even Andrew Wiggins, depending upon the deal and what you'd be able to get back for him, and attack it that way to try and come up with a more formidable and deeper and better balanced team compared to the one that you admitted within the last 48 to 72 hours wasn't good enough. So in some ways, yeah, it's difficult to do, but in some ways they've already made it abundantly clear the way that they have to go about attacking it. Like, if they're saying we're keeping the big three and they're able to keep the big three because of Draymond's contract, well then, hello, it's not that hard to figure out who's going to be on the block. It'd be those next three best players.
No doubt, JD. Man, I just got a million questions for you, but I'm going to start back Friday because you were in the building. And I told Steiny Mother's Day weekend, I watched the game 2-3 times because it was almost uncanny just seeing the Warriors. Jay, I don't want to call it a no-show, but from the start of that game, nobody could hit a shot. Walk us through what was going through your mind, and now that it's over, I was telling Steiny I felt like they had a lot of good looks, including Klay Thompson, but they just missed.
It wasn't a no-show because they were trying. They just couldn't hit anything. They just weren't good enough. They looked a little old. Steph looked a little old Friday night, as great as he was in the playoffs and in the series. Klay looked, just terrible. I mean, short on every single shot. I mean, the the overall in the game, they get down 27-10 because they couldn't hit anything. The Lakers were extremely comfortable, as they really were the whole series for the most part, offensively. And then you look up at the end of the first quarter, the Warriors are only down 5.
Yeah.
They were only down 5 at the end of the second quarter before the DiVincenzo miss or block or foul or whatever it was, and then Austin Reeves hits the half-court shot, and then you're down 10. And the game was at a crossroads there because the Warriors had played so poorly, but yet we're kind of hanging around, and you're thinking, well, are they going to get this thing to where it's tied and they have a shot, or are the Lakers going to push it up closer to 20, and then the Lakers push it up closer to 20, and it's probably over. But even then it wasn't over because Klay Thompson had 2 wide-open attempts at a 3 early in the fourth quarter that could have pulled it to within 8, and at that point I think the Warriors, maybe even as badly as they played, could have had action, but I wasn't surprised. It was, that was one of many possible outcomes. I mean, they didn't make shots, and we talked about it Friday afternoon at this same time, guys. The fact that, what's the big question for Game 6 beyond, Wiggins? And Wiggins was clearly compromised, which I think gave him less of a shot than they would have had. But then the question was, does the offense travel down to Southern California? The answer was no, and the offense didn't travel to Southern California for the entire series, which is why they lost all 3 games down there. And defensively, the Lakers were able to get kind of what they wanted the whole series when they had the ball, which I'll admit that is something that surprised me a little bit because the Lakers had not been some great offensive team, but they were really able to get, whether it was transition buckets or LeBron getting ahead of steam or Davis inside or Reeves as the series went on got more comfortable. Russell and Schroeder had their moments. Lonnie Walker, the 4th, took over Game 4. Like, you just go up and down the Lakers roster, and they got positive contributions much more efficiently offensively than the Warriors did, and that's why the Lakers were the better team over the 6.
John Dickinson joining us on 95.7 The Game. All right, so the more I think about it, the more this is how it feels like it almost has to happen, and that's, okay, you want to keep the 3 together. I don't think that happens without Draymond getting some kind of new deal. I think it
might not.
If you're Draymond Green, why would you come back for just 1 year if you think or know you could get 2 years at $40 million even?
I don't think I would. And
right.
So that's the conundrum. I mean, the Warriors are probably going to have to pay Draymond beyond next year. I mean, that's,
right.
Again, all of this is contingent. I mean, he says he wants to be around. They say they want to keep him. So now you have to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, real quick, JD, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'd love this back and forth. I guess what I'm saying is if they come back with Draymond, Klay, and Steph, I think they're essentially saying Dre's here for the long haul.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, it just depends. I mean, are we talking, rip up the last year because he opts out and then it's 4? Like I was
thinking like 3 for 75.
Yeah, but
so
I'm thinking
he walks away. He's a free agent, and you go 25, 25, 25.
Yeah, I think it might be closer to 30,
okay.
30, 30.
That's fair.
But we'll see. And again, but that's accounting for the 20. This year as one of the 3, not this
Correct.
year plus 3.
No.
Yeah, I think that's the compromise.
Oh,
well, no, go ahead. I'm talking 3 more years, meaning this coming year is 1, and then 2 more.
Right. Correct. He opts out, becomes a free agent essentially, and goes 3 years for something. Now, the thing I'm thinking is there any way they can make Steph and Klay? Hey, Guru, you can join here. I'm sorry, man, because it's JD. You can always jump in. But what I'm getting at is they could do something with Klay and Draymond where their contracts expire the same year Steph does.
Yeah, they could, but again, now Klay Thompson, I think, is in his own other category because, and I said this on the post game, and I said this Saturday, Klay Thompson is no longer a max player. Now he's going to be a max player for next year because that contract is already signed, sealed, and delivered. But if it's true that Klay Thompson believes he's still a max player beyond next year, well, then two things are going to one thing's going to have to happen for sure. He's going to have to come back next year and look like it's 2018. Like, forget it. Like, I know we're talked about, can he, has he, did he? Oh, he didn't, then he did. And, every time he has a good game, he's back. And then he has 3 games like the last 3 games of the playoffs. And it's like, oh, I guess he wasn't really back. But he is no longer a max player until he proves otherwise. And the only way he's going to prove otherwise is by going out and having an all-star caliber, efficient, hit your 300 threes, but you do it at a much higher percentage than you did. Like that, that to me is the only way. And so, other than that, he's going to have to agree to a deal that's going to start declining the way Andrew Wiggins agreed to a deal that's going to start declining. And so, Klay's kind of in his own category as far as, do you want Klay for too much? Like, I'll say this right now, I'd be much more inclined to pay Draymond $25 to $30 million for 2 years beyond this next year than I would be to pay Klay Thompson $40 million for 2 more years beyond this year. Like, that's a no-brainer, right, Goo?
No, that's a great point, and I'm right behind you. Now, listen, because I know Steiny and everybody's listening, JD. Klay Thompson's a 4-time champ, one of the best shooters to ever play in the NBA. That's already established. But that 3 for 19, 2 for 12, the way it went down, it didn't sit right with me to where, Jay, I'm nobody, but I felt sorry for him. I was like, man, he's at home. All the stuff I knew was going through his dome, and you talked about it. I listened to your pre and post, like, would that be a curse to where he was trying to do too much? And I didn't feel like he was. The one thing he just kept doing was missing. With all that said, I got to switch it to Jordan Poole. He told Logan Murdoch basically what we all knew. He don't have a relationship with Draymond Green. It's strictly basketball. And I ask you this, John, do you think the Warriors can get something for Jordan Poole, or do you think he's kind of hurt himself with all that's gone on with this poor play?
Yeah, his value is not what the Warriors would have anticipated it being when they signed him to the contract. And we talked when they signed him to the contract. I didn't think they paid him because they thought he was going to be Steph Curry 2.0 or the heir apparent franchise lead guard. Like, I didn't think any of that. I didn't think they signed him because of that. I think they signed him because they didn't want to mess with the potential for him being able to leave if he had another great year this year, getting well beyond the price point that they were comfortable with. And I also think they didn't want him chasing it this year. I think they thought that would be a detriment to him if he was in the final year of his deal. But I think as it played out, the bet for the Warriors was the fact that he was at least going to be what he was last year. Yeah. And if he was what he was last year this year, then there'd be plenty of teams that would be looking for him in a trade. And so I thought, hey, we'll take that. They thought they'll take that Jordan Poole that they got last year again, and then he would be a big-time asset to be used to either send him off to his own team if you wanted that, or to be able to get some role players in that maybe are better fits if you choose that you want to go the path of trying to build around the big three. But now they've got a little bit of a conundrum because his value has gone down as the price goes up, which means there are a lot of teams that are looking around at the way the season played out for the Warriors, and they're going to be less willing to offer as much or as much without maybe a sweetener attached to it. So the Warriors are going to have to fight that as much as they need to probably try to use him to get better in this offseason, but they're also going to have to fight that versus, would they dare actually bring him back one more year to try and recoup some of the value? Because it may come down to that, as much as I think we all would agree that they would prefer at this point to trade him and bring back some role players in his place.
John Dickinson joining us on 95.7 The Game. What's your gut? And I get it. I'm just asking you how you think it's going to play out. Nobody's holding you to it, but what's your gut tell you happens with Myers and then Draymond Green?
I think Draymond ends up back. I think Myers, what it's going to boil down to is whether or not maybe the big three convince him. Like and again, just my opinion on it, I think he's looking to leave. I think his initial thought is, I'm going to leave, but he's trying to take extra time to make absolutely sure that he's got a clear head in doing it, and it's the right time, and that he's not but I also think he's probably going to listen to Steph Clay and Draymond try to convince him to stay over the next couple of weeks, as he sorts through it. And I think ultimately maybe they win out in this thing and something is able to be, gleaned from it. I could also see him within the next, I know it was reported it was going to take a couple of weeks. The other thing I could absolutely see, and I think you guys know this because you talk to him every couple of weeks and you know him, I could also see Bob reaching a point in that time frame where he goes, you know what, this isn't fair. Like, this isn't fair to everybody. Like, I need to do whatever. I need to make the decision. I can't be hemming and hawing. And I know he said to you guys, you don't ever make a decision until you absolutely have to, which I think is just tremendous life advice. And that's something I totally agreed with him, just in general principle. It's like, we all want to make decisions before we have to sometimes. Right. Let things play out. We get impatient, I think, just in life. But I could also see him, because he is such a thoughtful, considerate of others type of person, that he would say, hey, look, I got to get a grip on this thing. And if I am leaving, I got to tell everybody as soon as possible. And so, I would anticipate if he does decide to leave, maybe we hear that sooner than, the 2 weeks, although I guess he's going to be in Chicago at the pre-draft camps and all of that this week is my understanding. So we'll see. I mean, it sounds like everybody wants him to stay and ride it out. The Warriors would absolutely be better for him deciding to stay and ride it out. But I maintain what I've said all along, and that's that I think this thing is deeper than money. And I think it's deeper than just doesn't get along with Joe Lacob. And I think if you know Bob Myers and how deeply thoughtful he is as a person, you'd be able to understand that and remove some of the business part of it. Like, I think this is just not all about business, like we think it always is. Hey, pay me more money, I'll stay. Hey, give me more power and I'll stay. Like, I don't think, maybe that's some of it, but I just don't think that's how Bob is completely wired.
Man, great stuff, JD. Let me ask you this. I hate to put you on the spot, but I will. Because, I admit, I got drunk off of last year's title, which came out of nowhere. And Steiny early alluded to, Dub Nation, some are so spoiled. Where do you put this season? And for me, JD, I can honestly tell you, I'm disappointed because I thought they could go further, and I thought this series could go 7. But I'm going to ask the great John Dickinson your thoughts and what word you would use to describe this season that just ended last Friday night in L.A.
Oh, it was disappointing. I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, 44-38 was disappointing. I mean, there was talk that before the punch and training camp and all that, there was a lot of people thought this team could be better. I mean, I go back to it, and I never forget this. I didn't agree with this at all. But the first pregame press conference, or not pregame, but the first preseason press conference, I think it was back in like September 22nd, and Bob and Steve, this is right before training camp and before they were going to go overseas, and I'm thinking, Steve Kerr said that he thought that the Warriors bench could be the best bench they've ever had and in line with the 14-15 bench. And I like whether I don't know whether he got caught off guard or like he just like he was feeling himself in the moment or whatever. But I remember like almost noticeably gulping like really? Like how is that even going to be possible compared to the contributions you had last year? But yeah, the regular season was not what they wanted it to be. They were fighting the whole year from 3-7 to get it back on track. Then they get it back on track, and then they have injuries. Other players played well. I know I've mentioned this a few times, guys. It was almost like the Warriors had two different teams. They had the team when Steph was out, where certain players got more of an opportunity, and Wiggins was out, and certain players got more of an opportunity, and those players played well in those opportunities to help the Warriors still be a 500 team. They weren't a great team, but they were at least a passable 500 team when a few players were missing. But then when they got everybody whole, they were never those same pieces that played well in the roles that they had when they were expanded couldn't play well in lesser roles when the better players and the players that the team needed to be more dependent on were all there and available. And so that was something that they just couldn't shake all year long. They were. I think their non-Curry team was in a weird way better than you would have anticipated, but their Curry team with the whole thing whole was worse than you would have anticipated because the pieces just didn't consistently fit together properly.
Yeah. All right, JD, appreciate it as always, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Yeah, sounds good, fellas.
All right, that's John Dickinson, 95.7 The Game's reporter.